U.S. President-elect Donald Trump still about 2 months away from taking office, but it's already upping the ante when it comes to trade negotiations. He is promising to hit Canada and Mexico with tariffs as high as 25%, wants both countries to secure the border, crack down on the flow of illegal drugs into the United States. But these aren't the only issues on Trump's radar, especially when it comes to us here in Canada. Joining us now with more, Kevin Hebner, Global Investment Strategist with TD Epoch. Kevin, great to have you back on the program.
Hey, Greg.
All right, so it's been an interesting week so far. We're only halfway through it. On Monday, I thought by some of the appointments he was making to his cabinet, we get some ratcheting down on the tariff talk, and then suddenly, boom, this hits us. So let's talk about how significant these announcements are.
So certainly the threat, excuse me. So Trump actually doesn't become president for another 54 days. So he's trying to say, what's he going to do in the first 100 days? What's he going to do on day one? So making these threats towards China, Mexico, and Canada. And certainly China is the number one target. Mexico's a strong number two. And then in Canada, there's a number of particular issues that he has with Canada. One concerns the bilateral current account surplus. So Canada exports a lot more to the US than the import. And Trump is very focused on these bilateral imbalances because he thinks they don't reflect fair trade, that they're due to import barriers, export subsidies, undervalued currencies, these sorts of things. So that's certainly one thing he's very focused on with Canada. The second thing that bothers him a lot in terms of the relationship with Canada is NATO defense spending. And this has been a theme of US presidents going back for decades, going back to Eisenhower in the 50s. Canada is now spending only 1.3% of GDP on defense. That's one of the worst NATO member countries. The US is, in fact, spending more than all the other 31 NATO countries put together. So they want to have a fair distribution. You can see this on the chart that we have the US spending a very high percentage of GDP. Poland has ramped up their spending in response to the activities in Ukraine. But Canada is a real laggard in this regard. The second chart we were hoping to show illustrates the current account surplus as well. Huge current account surplus with China, with the EU, with Mexico. Canada is more mid, but it's still very substantial. And this is a big issue for Canada, with 75% of Canada's exports going to the US. It's similar for Mexico, with 83% of Mexico's exports going to the US. So Trump sees this opportunity to threaten tariffs. And he's doing this, if you've read Art of the Deal, he wants to create options for negotiation. So there's a lot of areas about tariffs and the threat of tariffs that he likes. And you could see this through when he made the tariff, he put it out on social media. And within 2 hours, he's on the phone with a world leader. Justin Trudeau has called him and wants to discuss what they can do to de-escalate this matter that doesn't kick in until at least 54 days from now.
All right, so that was a very interesting development. There's some nice context behind it all. As you said, getting world leaders on the phone, even though there's more than 50 days from office. Also on the agenda, we know that in 2026, the new NAFTA, the USMCA, comes up for open ups and discussions. There's some issues embedded in that as well. You don't think we're going to have to wait until 2026 to start putting some of those on the table?
So these are all very old issues, again, going back to the 80s, through the 90s. Through Trump's first term, and now as he begins his second term, these are important. Certainly, he's not a patient person. He's not interested in waiting till 2026. So he wants to open a number of issues. Autos is always front and center, and not just with Canada, but also with Mexico, with Germany, Japan, and increasingly with China, with BYD, and so forth. So it's a big focus. There's some other issues related to that. Lumber, dairy, the digital services tax. It's hard to know which is exactly the most important to him, but typically autos is the front runner in these negotiations.
All right, so tariffs, we know, is the preferred instrument of President-elect Donald Trump. Some people will say, well, if you're going to impose tariffs, what you're going to do is reignite inflation. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so Trump is very focused on tariffs, and he had a speech last month in which he said tariff is his favorite word in the dictionary. It's a beautiful word. And so he does like to use it. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One is it does get Justin Trudeau on the phone. It creates opportunities for negotiation. It creates revenues for the US Treasury. And he could well get $40 billion to $80 billion in revenues next year, which gives them a lot of money, for example, to pay for corporate tax reductions. And certainly tax is probably the second biggest focus of the Trump administration once it starts to get into gear. It's also very important with them from onshoring or homeshoring production. Over the last 15 years, we've seen about 2 million jobs brought back to the United States. So there's a bit of a recovery in the manufacturing sector as well. And there's the national security implications that we need to be able to produce a lot of things, semiconductors, pharmaceutical ingredients, that are necessary, particularly as the relationship with China becomes more difficult. So tariffs are front and center. It's a form of industrial policy. The Trump administration is going to be very focused on this. And this is just the starting gun of this issue. In terms of what happens to the US economy as a consequence, so say, for example, you increase the price of imports to Canada. So the nominee for Treasury Secretary, he says that typically 40% of that tariff increase is offset by a rise in the US dollar. He also says that often the company exporting to the US, they see their margins come down. And then the remaining impact, part will be reduced demand, so you'll be buying less, and part will be increased prices. So net, that's sort of stagflationary. Growth is a little bit lower, prices are a little bit higher, but overall, it's sort of rounding error. And the evidence from 2017, 2018, when we had the first round of tariff hikes, it's really hard to see this in the data. And right or wrong, this is what the Trump administration and his key economic advisors, how they're viewing this. They think that they can put tariff hikes on, and that the negative impact on the US, both in terms of inflation, the consumer, lower growth, is going to be relatively small. And I'd also want to emphasize that there's a lot of room for tariffs to be hiked in the US. Currently, the average effective tariff in the US is just under 2%. If you look historically, tariffs have been the number one revenue source for the US government. And before World War II, they averaged 20 to 50%. So if we go up to the historical mean, tariffs go up a lot. And I don't think Trump has that intention, but the average tariff could double, triple quite easily during the next 4 years. So I think we should expect a lot. And ultimately, the response, either by the government of Canada, the government of Mexico, the government of Beijing, is going to be very important. And so far, we've seen very different responses from those governments. Trudeau seems very keen to talk. The president of Mexico has been saying, we're not interested in talking. In fact, we're going to retaliate. And Beijing has had a very similar response to Mexico. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. And certainly it means a lot more volatility, particularly for global currencies.